Welcome to WJ Live, where we equip listeners with the truth. My name is Andrew J. Shasha. I'm a reporter with the Western Journal. Today I'll be joined by Brian Chai, Floyd Brown, and George Upper as we discuss how big tech is censoring conservative voices, again, how Facebook is helping the Democratic presidential candidate, again, how polls are setting up the left to not accept this year's election results, and tonight's dueling town halls between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. All right, guys, so with big tech back in the news cycle after yesterday's New York Post expose, I actually wanted to talk about another instance of a major big tech case, or what could be a major big tech case that just went live yesterday. We have in Florida's 13th Congressional District a candidate, Anna Paulina Luna, fantastic conservative candidate, Hispanic veteran. She's wonderful. She has been fighting with Twitter since last December to get verified for her election. Now, according to Politico and The Hill, Twitter Gov promised last year in December that they would be verifying all congressional and gubernatorial candidates that were ballot qualified. That's a pretty low threshold. It is relatively simple to get ballot qualified in those primaries, but they did not come up on their goal in any way, shape, or form. According to The Hill, by Super Tuesday, or 1 week before Super Tuesday, there were 90 candidates across 5 states for those 5 primaries that were not verified at the time, despite that promise. And they have, to this day, continued to fail to verify certain candidates. Paulina has gotten in contact with them, or Luna, has gotten in contact with them multiple times, and every time she gets the same cut and paste response that you need a Ballotpedia page, an official Ballotpedia page, you need a profile with your name and candidacy on it and your actual picture, and you need to follow Twitter's rules and have no tweets that break the rules, which they don't allow, because any tweet that breaks the rules you have to withdraw or they delete it before they'll reactivate your account. So what she's decided to do is her lawyers have brought an FEC complaint as of yesterday, officially filed, that essentially their argument is the unwillingness to verify her, but the willingness to verify her opponent, former Democratic Governor Charlie Crist, the current congressman for the district, that is akin to an in-kind campaign contribution, a non-monetary contribution to the campaign of Charlie Crist, that is not registered and is thus illegal. That argument, on top of being an incredibly interesting argument, it's very different from what we typically hear traditionally from conservatives when they want to fight those big tech anti-discrimination cases, has a real chance of getting before the courts and setting precedent, because instead of going to the FEC, which currently can't meet quorum due to some resignations this summer, it will bypass that 60-day review window and go right before the federal district courts to be heard, which gives them a very interesting chance to argue this case and potentially set some pretty serious precedent one way or the other as to whether or not big tech can engage with the elections in that way, shape, or form. So what I want to ask you guys, particularly Floyd, I know you have quite a bit of experience with campaign finance, that I want to ask, is this an interesting, or is this a good argument or angle of attack? Is this an interesting way to go about this?
This is an excellent argument. And in fact, I know that Gun Owners of America had a similar complaint that they filed and actually got official, what they call MER status from the FEC. The truth is, these big tech companies have been flagrantly violating campaign law by helping left-wing candidates. We saw it last night in the presidential campaign. I mean, here you have credible information about Hunter Biden, and what do? They take it down, and Twitter right now is literally suppressing one of the biggest stories about former Vice President Joe Biden, that he absolutely lied. He said he had nothing to do with his son's businesses, and we now know that that was just a complete and utter bald-faced lie. And so these big tech platforms, and we've been following this for years. We know that, for example, in the race of Eddie Gillespie for governor of Virginia a few years ago, we know because Western Journal has 40 million followers on Facebook, we could literally see Facebook was suppressing our ability to cover that race in Virginia. Same thing happened in the last election cycle. So this is a great lawsuit. This is an important lawsuit, and hopefully, finally, it's a way we can get our hooks into these just absolute monopolies that are totally disregarding the First Amendment, totally disregarding the traditional way American politics has been done in the public square. So my hat's off to candidate Luna, and let's hope that she gets that blue check mark, but let's also hope that she wins this race.
And I'm personally very disappointed because I thought I finally knew how to get verified on Twitter. Finally, I was just going to get ballot qualified. I'd be all set, but they're not even honoring that. So that's I guess I'm just going to go blue checklist forever.
Do you guys think that like companies like Twitter and Facebook should they be regulated like
No.
Okay.
They should be broken up by federal. That's my opinion. They should be broken up by federal antitrust action. If you try to regulate them, I promise you, those regulations are already written. They've been written by the lobbyists employed by the big tech companies so that they can hand them and say, file this, make this law, and that will be a disaster. It will protect their monopoly status.
And that's exactly why Mark Zuckerberg says all the time, please regulate me, please regulate me, please regulate me.
Exactly.
And the reason is he knows there's this symbiotic relationship between government and big tech, and that's his dream is to be regulated.
Dana Lash, in response to some of the stuff that came out yesterday with the New York Post article, actually said it's like Twitter wants to be regulated, and I responded to her on Twitter and said, yes. They do. That is what they want. They want to be regulated because they're the ones who are going to write the regulation.
And so what else I also want to ask before we transition is just, is this, if this case succeeds, are we going to see a radical difference in the way that conservatives bring these cases before the courts and before our government and kind of bring this topic up?
Sure.
We have some fundamental problems. I wrote an entire book on this called Big Tech Tyrants, and these are very complex questions because tech platforms have to have the right to censor. And the reason that and most conservatives hate it when I say that, but the reason that they have to be able to censor is that the Supreme Court has said pornography is protected speech under the First Amendment. So if you just said, okay, anything under the First Amendment goes on Facebook, Facebook would become a porn site. Same is true with Twitter. Twitter practically already is.
Yeah, right.
But the truth is that they have to be able to censor in order to protect their audiences from just being inundated with porn. Now, what the big tech platforms have done has been abuse that ability to censor to suppress conservatives, Christians, pro-lifers, and all of those communities are under active suppression. And now they're even suppressing the President of the United States. I mean, what hubris do they have that they say, well, we're more powerful than the President of the United States, and we're going to, I run Twitter, and I'm going to, if I don't want to tweet from President Trump, I'm not going to have it. So,
I'm the arbiter of what the president should be allowed to tell his voters. That's ridiculous.
Well, and the worst has been the coronavirus, okay?
Yeah.
On the issue of coronavirus, Tucker Carlson was talking about this the other night. He was censored on Facebook for talking about the change in the CDC's policy, and he was quoting the CDC, and he was still censored by the big tech platforms. So, they've got these certain little obsessions. Vaccines is another one. You can't have no discussion about the science. Or science is trying to discover things through a process.
It evolves. Right.
Yes, and
I hate that word, but it is essentially what it does.
But you have to be able to experiment. You have to be able to talk about the results of your experiments.
That's right.
And yet they are completely suppressing discussion of coronavirus, discussion of masks, discussion of all of these little areas that they think that they're from Silicon Valley are the rulers of all, and they'll tell us what to do.
And it really didn't start to break in the wrong direction until about 4 years ago, when this president really recognized the power of this social media, like of the ability to get this done and surpass the traditional media.
I know how we can stop the spread of coronavirus. If we ban cell phones, because we know anyone who has coronavirus, they get their coronavirus onto these cell phones. So these are mass spreaders. Mm-hmm. Cell phones are mass spreaders. So if we outlaw cell phones, we won't have to wear masks.
Pretty much a 1-to-1 correlation between cell phone ownership and coronavirus.
I bet you can't find someone
who has coronavirus and doesn't
have a smartphone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't see how we haven't seen that causality already. Kayla, let's make sure we link when we post this to. I'm speaking to our newly promoted senior video director, Kayla Kunkel. Let's make sure we link. She loves it when I call her out. To Floyd's book, Big Tech Tyrants. When we post this, it's a great book, and I know a lot of our readers are going to want to get that if they don't already have it. A lot of them probably already have it,
and they can get it on Patriot Depot. And speaking of Patriot Depot, by the way, I am dressed from head to toe today in Patriot Depot, and I know you guys are loving this style. I mean, check out this shirt.
It's gorgeous. It
and
looks
this hat,
excellent on you.
Don't tread on me, hat.
Very patriotic.
I'm ready for the election. I'm ready to go vote.
You're always ready for the election, though. I mean, that's the truth of this.
So make sure you link to my book on Patriot Depot, please.
Yes.
All right, guys. So I have to admit, as much fun as we just had, I'm a little disappointed today because I was actually really looking forward to a presidential debate tonight, which isn't happening in lieu of that.
You were looking forward to the free pizza in the newsroom is what I think you were mostly looking forward to.
I can't have cheese.
Okay.
Anyways, so in lieu of a debate, presidential debate tonight, we are actually getting a pair of town halls. Joe Biden's getting one on ABC. President Trump is getting one on NBC. Apparently, there's a big controversy because people are really upset that NBC is giving Trump any airtime. Shocker there.
Yeah.
People aren't upset. People at NBC are upset.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
People love
and
the
some people at
president.
ABC. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm going to make a prediction right now.
Go for it.
President Trump has more viewers than Joe Biden.
100% better ratings on NBC than ABC.
No, here's the tricky one.
I bet he doubles it.
So, I was just about to say, so Trump gets half the amount of time. So do you think total viewers in half the amount of time, he still surpasses Biden?
Wow, ABC's got Biden on twice as long.
2 hours, yeah. And NBC gets
wow, is that show dead? Man, Disney wrote off the whole night.
I have trouble believing Joe Biden's going to last 2 hours for that. Whereas Donald Trump in an hour is still going to be, looking like he's on a pogo stick.
Do you think they'll ask him about his relationship with Hunter Biden, since that's the big story?
Only if he tells them to.
If anything, everyone should be upset with NBC that they're not giving Trump more airtime. At this point, I don't see how, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys don't agree with me, I don't see how the Trump campaign doesn't see that the better strategy. I agree that the views are fantastic, but the better strategy at this point is let Biden get up there, untested, unparalleled, let no one go before him, and just let him fall apart. At this point, you have hours for him to go up there and just speak nonsense.
Well, the big argument is, Biden was going to be there for 2 hours, and now Trump's competing with that time. Mm-hmm. That argument made really good sense in 1964. Mm-hmm. It's 2020. Yeah. Anybody who wants to watch both these events will have no trouble watching one and DVRing the other,
putting
or
it on
watching it on YouTube later.
Yep.
Whatever they want to do. This is not any sort of objection that actually makes any sense.
So that kind of leads to my first question: is why is the left, or the New Yorker Sue Halpern called the NBC's decision stunning and shameful?
Well, I can tell you why. It's the same reason why they want to suppress conservatives in social media. since their ideas don't compete effectively with
That's
ours,
exactly
they
right.
have to censor us. They don't want people to see Donald Trump. They want people to see the caricature they've created of Donald
Right.
Trump. They don't want us to discuss issues. That's why they're so upset about ACB right now.
Of course.
Because, people see her and they like her, and like 80% of Americans now want her on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And when they see, Kamala Harris and these other senators, grill her and give these long-winded, just convoluted, crazy speeches, they know which side they're on.
Right.
So, my biggest criticism of President Trump in that first debate was that he interrupted too much because I wanted to hear Joe Biden mumble and say nonsense.
Right.
Most of the time he was talking, he was just blah, 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 blah. The guy's, incoherent at best. And so I kept saying, President Trump, just let him talk, because what he's saying is so embarrassing.
Right.
Just let him do it. You're
Let him dig his own hole.
You're protecting him
Right.
by interrupting him.
It
For
definitely
roughly a
felt, it definitely felt like Trump let him off the hook a few times.
Yes.
'Cause there were times where
At least
Biden
twice.
was going
Yeah.
nowhere,
Yes.
and Trump just kept
Yes.
interrupting.
For roughly a decade, the policy with Joe Biden has been if you give him enough leash, he will hang himself with it. I don't understand how
Yeah,
we
longer
are
than that. Yeah.
But I can't imagine snoozing through 2 hours of that guy.
I can't imagine him
that's
lasting
like,
for 2
I
hours.
Want to? I definitely am not watching that. I can tell you, I can't take it. I can't take 5 minutes of the guy.
Especially given, ABC is going to be giving him softball
Oh, yeah,
questions, the
absolutely.
easiest questions. Conversely, what do you guys think NBC, how do you think NBC's town hall with Trump will look like? Do you think they'll be a little nicer, for lack of a better term, fairer, or do you think they kind of veer towards their, usual, I guess it's more MSNBC, but kind of that leftist shtick?
One nice thing about President Donald Trump is it almost doesn't matter, because Donald Trump has his list of 6 or 8 or 10 things that he wants to make sure he gets out to the American people tonight, and he's going to get those things out to the American people tonight.
Yeah.
And no matter what they ask him, no matter how ridiculous the questions are, he will do that, and he will also point out if that question is ridiculous. He's the only candidate I know of who says, that's a nasty question. That question's ridiculous. Why would you even ask me that? But now I take that back. Biden does do that sometimes, but it's when he's asked a legitimate question he doesn't want to answer. Trump just doesn't deal with the gotcha questions. He's just like, it's a hypothetical. Move on. I got other stuff to talk about.
Yeah. So, which is a great segue to my topic, because, we're talking about the media, and I wanted to talk about one of George's favorite topics, which is these polls. These polls are absolutely embarrassing. First of all, they're oversampling Democrats, number one. And number two, as George has explained on multiple podcasts, they are going to, just Americans, not to likely voters, registered voters. And both of those are distortions of the polls. But they're doing a couple of other things. But I don't want to talk about how biased and how bad the polling is this cycle. What I really want to talk about is, what is this setting up? Because the media has shown us they're not interested in telling Americans about what's going on. They're trying to be an active participant in the political process, which is new. I mean, they actively want to be the person who changes the game. And I think what they're doing is they're setting up the left. They're setting up the left. The left is going to be so unbelievably shocked. Now, they were shocked 4 years ago when Hillary lost because she was up 15 points. But, this time, I mean, they've just pounded it home. It's like the only thing they talk about in the race. Joe Biden has won. Joe Biden has won. Joe Biden has won. Joe Biden, and they are trying actively to suppress conservatives from voting. They want everyone to not go out and vote that's conservative, because it doesn't matter. Your vote is a waste of time. We already have decided this election. Joe Biden's won.
Right.
Well, I think what they're doing is when Donald Trump's going to win, and I will once again predict Donald Trump is going to win this race. And I've already explained on numerous podcasts why I believe he's going to win this race, but he's going to win. But my question to you guys is, does that precipitate riots on the part of the left? Because they've all been told to the person that Joe Biden's already won the race. And are they going to spin a conspiracy theory that somehow Donald Trump stole the election
Again?
Again,
Of course they are.
And will that lead to serious destruction in city after city after city after city?
I think we better be ready for that. I think, we still remember the sort of iconic images from election night in 2016 of liberals crying at the Hillary rally, the Hillary watch party. I don't think we're going to see crying again. I don't think if Trump does win this, and I agree with you, Floyd, I think he's going to. I don't know that we're going to be able to announce that election night. I think with all of this mail-in stuff going on this year that's new and that a lot of election committees aren't really ready for, we'll see what kind of results we can confidently announce election night. We'll be covering that, of course, on WJ Live right here. We'll have full election night coverage. So I don't know exactly what we'll be able to say or what we won't be able to say. But what I would predict is that the crying is over. We're not going to see crying. We're not going to see mourning. We are going to see anger from the left. And to your point, Floyd, the polls are largely national polls, and swing state polls can be more useful. The national polls are useless. A lot of them actually, the national polling in 2016, a lot of them were actually correct or within the margin of error, and they said Hillary's going to win by 2 points, 4 points, whatever. She won the popular national vote by 3 points ish, right? It didn't matter. That was irrelevant. And so part of the lie here, part of the skillful lying on the part of the mainstream media is that these national polls matter. And that's one of the ways in which they set up their own readers, their own watchers and listeners to be angry. Because the polls said she was going to win. The polls say Biden is going to win by 10 points. It literally does not matter what the national polls say. We shouldn't even conduct them. We certainly shouldn't report on them. They're not newsworthy. They're not helpful. They don't predict anything. They're sort of a popularity contest. Who cares?
But they've been trying to say conservatives are actively suppressing vote. I would contend that they are actively trying to suppress conservative votes by constantly harping that Joe Biden's already won the election.
That's right. Well, and their new thing now is if you have to wait in line to vote, you're being oppressed, right? That's voter suppression if you have to wait in line.
Yeah. Well, the truth is what we really need from everybody that's conservative is not to go out and just vote for Donald Trump.
Vote the ticket.
We need those votes down the ticket.
Absolutely.
If we are going to actually fix this problem, it requires us having a Republican Senate and a Republican House.
That's right.
Because if we don't have the House and if we don't have the Senate, and even if President Trump wins, we are going to see 4 more years of impeachments and investigations and mumbo jumbo that conspiracy theories that are just off base. It's really important that people get out and they actually understand that those votes down ticket matter and they've got to vote Republican down the line.
Absolutely right.
And just to circle back real quick, Floyd, about when you asked if you think we're going to see violence from the left, I don't think you even have to look back that far to get a really good example of when the left didn't get a result they wanted. They seemed almost ready to riot, and that was the Breonna Taylor ruling.
Sure. We've seen grand jury decisions that we saw before with Michael Brown.
Yep. And obviously they didn't get the result they wanted.
Yep.
And I'll never forget the image. There was that one video clip of a truck, and it seemed like it was just preloaded with riot stuff, stuff to riot
Right.
with. It was just the most absurd thing.
Well, part of the reason the polls are so wrong is because conservatives have physical fear about showing their affection for Donald Trump. Now, fortunately, I'm 6'6", a big guy. I don't worry about physical fear. But I have friends that live in California and in other states. They won't put a Donald Trump sticker on their car
Right.
because they think their windows will be smashed out, and they're probably right. Where I think the race is going to be won is with Black Americans and Hispanics.
Yeah,
that's
I
where
think
Donald
you're
Trump's going to win. And think about how blacks feel in their community if they put a Donald Trump sticker on their car.
Yeah.
I mean, we know this one Trump supporter in Milwaukee was murdered for being a Donald Trump supporter. He was a black man, big Trump supporter. So the type of violence and suppression that goes on in those communities really makes people think twice about even whispering that they might vote for Donald Trump. But I couldn't believe it. There was a recent poll in North Carolina that showed Donald Trump was getting more than 20% of the black vote in North Carolina. I'm telling you, the way this race is going to be won is going to be Hispanics and blacks who don't like the rioting. They don't like the suppression of police. They want peaceful communities. They want their kids to go to good schools, and they see Donald Trump as behind those initiatives.
I mean, you can't say it enough that over the last few months, with all of the rioting and all the looting, there is one community that it has hurt more than any other, and it's the inner city community. I mean,
No question.
Those communities of color have been absolutely ravaged by this, and I think they're going to show up, and they're going to be surprising in the way that they show up, because the Democrats have been counting on them to show up for decades, but they're going to show up in a different way this time.
And it only takes 20% of blacks voting for Donald Trump, and there's no way Joe Biden can win this
That's right.
race.
Yeah, if he's limited to 80% of the minority vote in this country, there's no way he can win it. I mean, it's mathematically impossible. And that's one of the ways I think that the polls are inaccurate. I think they're wildly undersampling turnout among minority voters, and I think they're wildly overestimating their support of Joe Biden. I think they're looking at, Trump won, X amount in 2016. Romney did even worse than that in 2012. We'll split the difference. Blacks this year will probably go Republican, about somewhere between those two things. It's not going to be close to that. All right, so moving on, the big story, we've already alluded to it today. Big story yesterday, of course, was the New York Post story, which revealed what appear to be authentic emails between Hunter Biden and some Ukrainian businessmen that seem to indicate that Joe Biden did, in fact, have some awareness, despite multiple denials of these accusations, of his son Hunter Biden's dealings with overseas businesses, particularly in Ukraine. There's some additional information coming out today that shows that he may have been involved in China as well, and that Joe Biden may have been informed of that. The big story, actually, though, on the right became not just that, but the way that social media accounts or social media platforms dealt with that. And specifically, Twitter's gotten a lot of play in the news and on the right. But what I really want to talk about is Facebook. Facebook has gotten a lot less attention. We saw yesterday morning, about 11 o'clock, 11:10 Eastern Time, Policy Communications Director Andy Stone tweeted this about the New York Post story. While I will intentionally not link to the New York Post, I want to be clear that this story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. Now, 2 hours after getting a lot of flack for that, and well-deserved flack, he clarified a little bit. He said, "This is part of our standard process to reduce the spread of misinformation. We temporarily reduce distribution pending fact-checker review." And then he linked to Facebook policy, and I'll read just one sentence from that. In many countries, including in the U.S., if we have signals, here's the key. If we have signals that a piece of content is false, we temporarily reduce its distribution pending review by a third-party fact-checker. So I emailed Facebook's media relations folks yesterday. I have not gotten a response. In their defense, I emailed them fairly late, so I'm going to cut them a little slack there. But here's what I want to know. What criteria, what signals did Facebook, are they claiming they got that this piece of content is false, because I'm only aware of one signal, and that is when the Biden campaign issued a response to the New York Post story and did not claim that the emails were false.
Hardly a denial.
Not at all. All they said was, we checked Joe Biden's schedule, and he didn't have any meetings with Ukrainian businessmen on it. Well,
Perfection.
Whatever. A schedule is, as everybody watching this knows, because everybody watching this had a schedule today and they didn't follow it. A schedule says what you plan to do that day. It's not a list of what you did do that day.
Well,
so that it's the non-denial is the only signal I know of, and that non-denial signaled the New York Post story is correct.
So Joe Biden has been swimming in the swamp for 50 years, okay? And during that 50 years, he's made a very modest salary, but yet his family is fabulously wealthy, okay? And they weren't wealthy when he went to Congress. And they've gotten government. His brother's gotten government contracts. We all know about what Hunter Biden's done, pulling down these massive amounts of money from China and Russia and Ukraine and Kazakhstan and
Right.
a lot of these other, really what I would call, they deal with kind of thugs. They deal with the worst of the worst out there, and as a result, his family is fabulously wealthy. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that he's been trading on his positions. And the media's protected him. The media has not asked him any tough questions. The media is lost all credibility. It's why Americans today, they don't believe the media. They barely read the media anymore. They practically don't watch it, because the credibility of the American media is about zero. And they deserve to have no credibility, and it's because of this. But the tech platforms should have zero credibility too. I've been calling for people to deplatform themselves. Realize Facebook is out to mess with your mind. Twitter is out there to mess with your mind. They're sewage traps anyway. Just get off of these platforms and just read the Western Journal and you'll be fine.
Now, that's good advice.
And Floyd, as you said, the credibility is zero, but what really upsets me is that yesterday they showed that they don't even care about their credibility. Because for the last 4 years, we've seen every story peddled with these anonymous sources that we can't verify. These sources can't be verified by other outlets, by Facebook, by Twitter, and the stories run, and there's been nothing to stop them. Glenn Greenwald tweeted out, I think it was either yesterday night or this morning, if this was the standard, the Pentagon Papers, WikiLeaks, Snowden, the Steele dossier, none of those things would have been reported because they were unverifiable. Is that the standard we want to have for journalism? Is that whistleblowers, and we've talked about whistleblowers in the last year, how important they are. Are watchdogs going to be silenced in the media from now forward?
Well, I think it even goes further than that, Andrew. I think what's happening here, Facebook has a policy. They do have an interest in stopping the spread or slowing the spread of disinformation. I will grant. I disagree with it, frankly, but I will grant them that they're interested in doing that. Okay. But their stated policy is that they will do that when they have signals that the content is false. There are no such signals. The only signal they could have gotten is a phone call from the Joe Biden campaign saying, "Don't run with that. It's not true." And the reason why that might actually not be all that far from the truth, the phone call from the Biden campaign idea, is if you look at this guy, Andy Stone, who is the policy communications director is his title. Actually, one of my questions to Facebook is, what does that mean? What does that guy do? But look at his Twitter profile. His Twitter profile says, I work for Facebook, duh. And then it says places he used to work, including at House Majority PAC, which is a Democrat organization dedicated to preserving and expanding the Democrat House majority, the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and Senator Barbara Boxer, the former Democratic senator of California. This guy is a partisan. I guess, yeah.
Hack is the word.
I was going to say leftist. I don't know him well enough to say leftist. Hack for sure. This guy is not unbiased. And so another question I have for Facebook, and I asked them and haven't gotten an answer, is, are you comfortable that this is the right guy to make this decision about the signals that a piece of content from a admittedly right-leaning publication like the New York Post, which is not wildly right wing, but they lean right.
Yes.
But this is a legitimate publication. Are you comfortable that this guy, this partisan hack, is the right guy to make these decisions? I'm not. I think that's a ridiculous person to have in that role.
They are, because they're a bunch of left-wing Democrats that are running these companies.
They're comfortable overplaying their hand.
And so, the truth is that they actively suppress pro-lifers. They actively suppress Christians. They actively suppress conservatives. They actively suppress, the discussion around climate science. They actively suppress the discussion around vaccines and around coronavirus. And all of these issues need to be discussed, because for people to make informed decisions about their representatives, they need to know what the representatives are discussing, and they need to discuss these issues. It's just like Biden saying he won't comment on court packing until after he's elected. No, people need to discuss the issues before the election so they can make an informed decision. That's the whole genius of the American system. So these tech platforms don't inform people. They don't help people make good decisions. And so that's why I encourage people to deplatform themselves, get off of these things, and find reliable sources of news, and then rely on those sources.
Yeah, I do think there is one silver lining to all of this. And I feel like, particularly with the Hunter Biden case, I genuinely think if that story hadn't been censored, it kind of boil over in a week. I don't think it would change very many minds.
I agree with that.
Yeah, Biden supporters are still going to love Biden. Trump supporters will probably be a little more fired up, but now the conversation has almost shifted from the story itself to big tech bias, and I think that is an issue that a lot of undecided voters are going to have strong feelings on. And I'm very curious. I know both of you gentlemen, probably Andrew too, have already predicted Trump's going to win. I'm very curious to see if this potential inflection point, what type of impact it could have.
Yeah. Josh Manning, one of our deputy managing editors, often a co-host on WJ Live, this morning greeted me as I walked into the office with, "Today is the day we won the election." And he believes Twitter won the election for Donald Trump because of this story.
Oh, that was my idea. I was just talking with Josh before you walked in.
So he stole that from you?
Josh stole that from me.
Okay. I have no trouble believing that at all. That sounds like the classic Josh Manning grift.
Can I send you signals that it's not
That
true?
it's not true? Yeah. I would believe those signals. All right, Floyd, I'm going to ask you this question because you're the right guy to answer this question. You are absolutely the right guy. Since any action, we already talked about antitrust action versus regulation, et cetera. But any action federal government is going to take is going to be long in coming. It's a process. It's going to take time. That being the case, what alternatives would you suggest to WJ Live listeners if they do want to be deplatform? If they want the truth, what do they do?
Well, first of all, there's a new app that I should give full disclosure here that I've been involved in helping encourage along, and that's called Superfeed. And Superfeed does not allows the viewer of the content to have complete control over the content. So you can get the content you want on the Superfeed app, and if you want to know what's really going on and you don't want censorship from big tech, I encourage you, go get the Superfeed app. The truth is that that's the only way, by using the Superfeed app, is the only way I know what Donald Trump is tweeting, because you can get tweets from the President of the United States on Superfeed because they're pulled down immediately and put on a different platform. So you can actually know what the president's saying on Twitter if you're following him on Superfeed and follow the Donald Trump mini feed. So that's one thing I would encourage you to do. Download the app Superfeed. It's available for both Android and iOS. The other thing is that you just got to use your brain. You know, these big tech platforms, they want to think for you. But, you know, if they're watching this podcast, they're already thinking for themselves.
Right. Good for you.
And by all means, please go and share this podcast. You know, subscribe on YouTube. Share it on Facebook. If you want people to actually know what's going on, then we not only have to embrace alternative news, but we have to share it. And so both of those things are pieces of advice I would get. And yes, even though I think these should be outlawed,
because they're spreading COVID.
I still have one.
Western Journal is very much present on Superfeed, so we would welcome you to follow us there. Another place you can find WJ Live now is in the Apple iStore. We are or Apple Podcasts. I'm sorry, I should say. We are there now, so you can go subscribe there. You can like us there. You can give us a 5-star review so that other people will. Despite big tech suppression, other people may get a chance to hear us. If you like what you're seeing from us, please help support us on those platforms. That does help get the word out. And we will put a link to Superfeed when we post this on westernjournal.com so that you can download that app and find us there as well. That's the time we've got today, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. Most importantly, thank you for being here. We'll see you again every Tuesday and Thursday, 2 p.m. Pacific time, I always get those backwards. 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, right here on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal.